Welcome back for another video. I'm Eharbad, and in today's video, we're going to talk about the upcoming Fusion. We've just got the Fusion warm-up event that has dropped today. Well worth making sure you do this each day. It's just 15 points each day on upgrading artifacts, so it's very little. You'll get this without expending much silver at all, and you get generally a decent bit of rewards. Overall 200 energy, 20 gems, not to scoff at that, and the little ancient shard at the end is also quite nice. Rare skill tome, not bad either. The first thing I think we're going to jump over, have a look at the champion skills. Then we'll look at my rating of the champion, and then I'm going to look a little bit at the faction itself. Right then, with my throat cleared, I had a little frog caught in there and was making it sound a bit weird. And now we're on the champion skill page. So I'm just going to go through this very quickly. A1, quite an interesting one. We don't have many people that increase shield value. The only champion I can think of that grows shields is Brogni. This champion does it really just on himself and on the ally with the lowest HP. Now, what could be interesting about this one is because it's the lowest HP, if you have everyone at full health, you can HP tune that. So this could be quite interesting to use in a certain way, and I'm sure there'll be instances where this might come to be very useful. I can't think off the top of my head, but maybe in Clan Boss, using the Infinity, there could be a slot for this champion within that, but I'm not sure. I'll leave that to other people. But it's an interesting A1 anyway, quite unique. Beyond the growing of the shield, I don't think it's really going to do much. So it's interesting, but you probably in real play won't find that much value. Then on the A2, this is actually a really strong ability. Not only do we have an AoE hit, which is always quite nice, it means that you could put him in a stun set if you needed a bit of extra control, although I wouldn't recommend it necessarily on this champion. We have a really good shield, 30% of this champion's HP, and he is HP based. So as a Void legendary, I'm expecting pretty high base stats, and a 30% shield should be pretty big. Also, the decreasing cooldown of any ally skills. I think that's really interesting. If you think of a lot of champions that maybe aren't quite able to keep their buffs up all the time, having a cooldown reduction can be massive. Even just for things like drop defense on wave content, increase attack, block debuffs, all of these kind of things. If you can cycle them more quickly, I think it could be really, really interesting. This is on a 3-turn cooldown itself. So in terms of syncing up, you're ideally wanting to look for things that are, say, a 4-turn cooldown naturally, that this champion can effectively make into a 3-turn cooldown. And one thing that comes to mind is generally all enemy max HP skills are on a 4-turn cooldown. So, this champion could sync up nicely with that. Just a little thought off the top of my head. Then the A3 here, which books down to a 4-turn cooldown, we get the unkillable buff on all allies. So that with a 4-turn cooldown, that kind of brings them in line with the block damage champions, people like Helicath, Tower, etc. So 100% they should be a way of doing an unkillable with this champion for Clan Boss. I'm sure there'll be some interesting speed tunes that will come out. I think particularly having the decreased cooldown for the rest of the allies on the A2 will make some really interesting Clan Boss compositions. In addition to this unkillable on the A3, we'll get a taunt, which is a rare buff at the moment. So, that has innate value because there aren't that many other champions that have it, and you might not have any champions in your account that currently have the taunt buff. And obviously, taunt is pretty good in Shogun, for instance. And then we have a shield on himself, which is equal to 30% of the champion's max HP. Bit weird in that regard because we get a shield on this champion with an unkillable on all allies. So I'm guessing the unkillable Is it going to be on himself as well? I mean, it reads that it is on himself, but he's also giving himself a shield. It's kind of a bit of an odd combination. It's also odd that, with the A2, you have these big shields and then the unkillable. It almost reads like this probably should have been a block damage because that would make more sense, kind of thematically. But it isn't. It is an unkillable. So there we go. And then you've got this entanglement, which is a really interesting passive. When attacked under a shield buff, we have a 50% chance of increasing the cooldown of a random skill on the attacker by 2 turns. Now, the thing with the 2 turns is like Basher puts cooldowns put skills on cooldown for 2 turns, but it practically is only 1 turn because you actually tick the cooldown at the beginning of the turn before you take an action. So if it starts at 2 turns, the enemy takes a turn, it ticks down to 1 turn. They obviously miss that turn. But then at the start of their next turn, it's actually ticked down to 0. So you only really lose 1 turn. So it's kind of a 50% chance of increasing cooldown on a skill for what will probably effectively be 1 turn. So I don't think it will necessarily be like that reliable. So I wouldn't necessarily be relying on it, basically, for want of a better word. It does go up to 75%, which is pretty high, but it'll be interesting to see how it kind of plays out in real terms. For certain champions, maybe that have like 1 really dangerous ability, and maybe they only have, say, 1 active skill, this could probably be pretty strong. But the issue, I guess, is they'll probably have used that ability initially to attack you, so it'll be on cooldown anyway. I don't know. We'll see how it plays out, but I'm not probably putting as much value in this as maybe others have. But there are instances where I think it could work really nicely. And then HP all battles. We always like an all battles aura, so this is pretty good. We now just let me click over and we have a little look at my little ratings. I haven't done this for a while, but it was requested, so I put it together. I think he's massive for faction wars. Let's be honest. Like, I think that's the main reason the timing of this fusion is. We've just had Sylvan Watchers be released. Some people probably haven't been able to clear it. There are probably a lot of accounts that maybe don't even have 5 champions. Like, if I look at rares, or rather if I look at epics and better, I don't have 5 champions on the challenge account. So, this champion's going to be massive just to be able to have 5 viable champions at all. But beyond that, huge carry. I think you've got the shields on the A2, you've got the unkillable on the A3. You've got a lot of damage mitigation and survivability there, particularly for Faction War 21 boss who ignores defense. Shields are massive to be able to make sure you get through that. And then you've got that second line of defense, the unkillable as well. So I think really interesting champion to be able to get through Faction Wars. That taunt with the passive and all the shields and unkillable should be pretty good to get through the waves. I think you'll be able to do that without, having really any other wave control. That's where the possibility of a stun set might come in as well, with having the AoE hit on the A2. Decreasing cooldowns could be very interesting depending on what other champions you're pairing him with, again in that faction war spot. So, if you don't have the other big supports, Oella, Elva, etc., I think this champion becomes a must-get just to be able to beat faction wars for that alone. If we then move on to Clan Boss, like I said already when we were looking through the skills, I think there are going to be many speed tunes made for this champion. The decreasing of ally turns, I think, is a really interesting addition to the kit, which could differentiate this champion from all the other unkillable compositions that exist. Similar to how Demitha really shook up the unkillable kind of strategy and kind of created a whole new set of unique unkillable compositions that were able to really push the damage numbers much higher than previous kind of Man-Eater, Tower, etc. teams could. I think having that decrease cooldown, we could see some really big numbers from the clan boss specialists. It'll be interesting to see, what people like Deadwood and Saphira and co come up with this champion. Moving on to Doom Tower. I mean, I haven't used Taunt much, but I could see this champion being useful for some of the wave content, especially with that unkillable Taunt combo. Has Mortu Macabre met his match? We'll see. Otherwise, the passive could be huge for difficult Doom Tower floors, but like I said, I'm not entirely sure how it's going to work in practice, like when we actually get to use it in real world events. It sounds great on paper, but is it actually going to be that impactful? We'll have to see. And then Shogun Grove, Taunt option, it's a rare buff currently. It is the ability we're meant to use to be able to beat that dungeon, which, disclaimer, I haven't actually even tried the battle on either of my accounts yet. I know I have the champions to be able to beat it on my main account. I just haven't had time, to be honest. I haven't bothered. Eventually I will. I should just, at some point whack a few thousand energy in or something and try and ascend all my crit damage amulets and accuracy banners. But beyond that, there's not really any reason to run it. Anyway, moving on. Dungeons, I think he'll be solid as progression, but he's not going to stay in anyone's teams long term. I don't see him being used really. Maybe Ice Golem is the only place where I think some kind of mid to late game accounts might find longer term use for him, just to be able to have that added survivability. But I just don't see him really as a dungeon champion. Arena, I have mentioned here that, there are a couple of niche uses. Anti-Mortu, if I have correctly predicted how that whole A3 is going to interact with Mortu, then I think it could be a really interesting champion to kind of counter Mortu Macabre. Live Arena could be interesting just because he's got some unusual kit there and could make for some tricky matchups. So he could be interesting as a Live Arena option. But myself, I don't play Live Arena. I don't enjoy it at all. I don't find it interesting, to be honest. What can I say? But other than that, I don't really think he's going to get much playtime in PvP. It's really not the designated or designed location. And then the last three areas that I've mentioned here, Hydra, Twins, and Sand Devil, they're just not his spot. He doesn't bring any of the key mechanics. Unkillable doesn't work in Twins. You need block damage. So, it is what it is. I did mention when we were going through the skills, it felt like with the whole shields and unkillable, it kind of maybe would have made more sense to be block damage than unkillable, but it is what it is. Overall, I think the champion's pretty good, like very good, with a couple areas where he's going to be truly superb. I think it's a very unique kit, so it's well worth getting, as there'll likely be more compositions and synergies and locations that he'll be good in that we haven't yet considered or conceived. It always takes, when people actually get this champion and then you get all, hundreds of people using him in loads of different locations, really trying him out, the more interesting and unusual uses will reveal themselves. You just have to look at Lonathariel for a huge value surge. Slightly annoying that I didn't get that fusion now because, stage 10 Fire Knight would be that bit easier with him. But yeah, it is what it is. Right, back into the game. I wanted to jump over to the actual index, and this is on my challenge account. So you can see for me, I have good wave control in Creator and a bit of damage coming from Ornn. Probably going to end up having to build Kellen for damage as well. And then, I don't have much. So I think this champion is going to be an absolute must get for my challenge account. So then I could use these three epics, maybe get another epic, hopefully from, say, the 2x Ancients. Otherwise, I'll probably have to be picking up one of these rares. I wish I got a copy of Tree Shield Knot. I think it would be fantastic. Obviously, I have the revive, but I don't have a spare copy of him, so it might end up being Turlac if I don't pull any other champions. But actually, if we just jump back in, even if you had other champions, I think he's a better taunt champion probably than Duoden. And then obviously the only other taunt option is Green Warden, who is a legendary. Not that many people probably have him, so there really aren't that many taunt options in the game. So I think you just have to pick up this guy. We don't know if there's going to be new content added in the next year that's going to require taunt. Who knows? They could add like an extra Hydra head where taunt is useful or impactful or required. Like, who knows? I think it's well worth getting him as long as the schedule is something that can be dealt with. Speaking of the schedule, obviously the fusion begins in 3.5 days' time. We know that because of the fusion warm-up event ends there. That will overlap with the end of CVC. So obviously we're going to have burnt a load of resources doing this Path of Vengeance. Then we're going to burn a load of resources doing CVC. And then we're going to go straight in to a hybrid fusion, which is typically very unforgiving. You can't miss anything. And I think it's pretty certain to say we're going to have 2 summoning events that are both going to be mandatory. They should, if things go as they normally do, it should line up with a 10x next weekend, which will mean you'll probably need to have a fair few Sacred Shards, probably minimum 4. But let's be honest, we don't know what the points are going to look like. We don't know how these epic fragments are going to be distributed. I have concerns that we're going to have to hit high numbers on both summoning events, to be honest, but let's see. And then the following weekend should be 2x Ancients, which will almost certainly be a champion chase. So anyway, yeah, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you liked it. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Throw in the comments what your thoughts of the champion are, whether you're going to be going for him, and how worried you are about the schedule we're going to get. So as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.